Man, I do love playing some Pokemon, but this game is so similar to all the others, and how am I supposed to see on such a small screen? If the developers are smart, they would finally bring this to a home console. Okay, how about a real game? Yeah, never mind, can we go back? Gotta catch 'em all. Such a short, four-word phrase that every kid who grew up in the 90s still has stuck in their head to this day. I remember running to the TV to watch it with my brother, singing the opening song. It was a wonderful time. Nowadays, all these kids have to sing their new motto. Gotta catch some of them. Pokemon has drastically changed since its introduction with Red and Blue back in 1996. From new Pokemon, to new regions, to new stories, and new consoles, the world of Pokemon has expanded to a place we never thought possible. The simple idea of monsters that you could carry around in your pocket has evolved a bit, with consoles getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, but the games are just as fun. And now with a mainline game finally on a home console, doesn't count, we can experience these grand adventures in HD on a big screen. But even though Sword and Shield are the first brand new generation on a home console, they weren't the first true story-driven Pokemon game on a home console. That came all the way back during the GameCube era and is one of the most creative, yet probably the weirdest Pokemon adventure to date. I know many of you have been waiting for this video for a long time because I did hint at it all the way back in my first ever review.
And we'll get to this another time.
It has been over a year and a half, but it is officially time. Today, we are finally taking a look at Pokemon Colosseum. Pokemon Colosseum was released on November 21st, 2003 in Japan, and then came to North America and Europe in March and May of 2004 respectively. Just as the Stadium games had served as the home console counterparts to Generation 1 and 2, Colosseum filled that role for Gen 3. The concept for Pokemon Colosseum was actually influenced by other RPGs like Final Fantasy VII and Persona 2, just with Pokemon slapped on top of it. Most of the models and animations for existing Pokemon were ported over from Stadium 1 and 2, which is totally out of the norm for them, but overall, the graphics were based on the manga rather than the normal Pokemon convention we see more commonly. The game's first preview was at E3 2003 before quickly being released just 5 months later. If you pre-ordered the game, it came with a bonus disc which had trailers for both the game and the Jirachi Wishmaker movie. Along with that, the North American disc had a downloadable Jirachi that could be transferred to a copy of Ruby or Sapphire, while the Japanese version contained a downloadable Celebi, but you needed to complete Colosseum first to access it. These were the only legit ways to access these mythicals outside of events, and are some of the rarest Pokemon to obtain in all of Generation 3. But because Europe is weird, the PAL version didn't include the bonus disc, which actually caused Nintendo to issue an official apology, which you don't see very often. Jirachi was then included in the PAL version of Pokemon Channel, so they could at least eventually get it. Another addition that was only accessible in the Japanese version was the e-reader functionality. You could purchase cards to scan, which in turn allowed you to access new trainer battles and new Pokemon to catch. But because the e-reader didn't do particularly well, this never made its way overseas, and very few people can access this nowadays. And the final edition that the game had was by far the most unnecessary. The bonus disc included an update for Ruby and Sapphire that fixed a berry glitch found in 2003, which stopped time-based events such as berries from growing. This might be the most obscure patch I've ever heard for any game, especially before you could download them from the internet, but at least it actually did something somewhat important, unlike so many patches we get nowadays. The opening for Colosseum immediately shows you that this adventure is going to be quite a bit different from the mainline games. Your average Pokemon intro has some upbeat music showing the new characters, new starters, and some little story aspects. But this game says to hell with that, with the main character blowing up a factory and escaping on a weird motorcycle. This game really starts off with a bang. This main character, Wes, was actually a member of Team Snagem. Yes, that's the real evil team's name. They really couldn't pick a more discreet name. That's like if a group of bank robbers were called Team Rabia. Kind of hard to avoid the police when you're just telling them that you're committing a crime. After you escape, you rest at outskirts stand before you get thrown into a battle that is your sort of classic early battle to teach you how to play the game. But this is where one of the major differences between the main games and Colosseum truly lies. Nearly every battle in this game is a double battle. There are a very select few that don't follow this trend, but because double battles were the new addition in Gen 3, they just slapped it on the entire damn game. I don't mind it because it's a nice change, but it's just so weird to me that they almost made an entire game based around this mechanic. At this rate, you might as well just call the game Pokemon Double Battle. Another weird change is that there is no starter selection in this game, and instead you just start with an Espeon and an Umbreon, which when I first played this game made no sense to me, but looking back at it, it works perfectly well. Counterparts from an iconic evolution line with good typings and one being offensive while the other being defensive is pretty dang smart for starters in a game based entirely around double battles. Still would have been cooler if we could pick out of the evolutions, but we can't always get what we want. Also, you start at level 25 and 26 for some reason instead of 5. The only reasonable explanation I can think of is because the game is shorter than normal, yet they wanted you to still reach around level 50 to 60 like you would normally reach at the end of a normal Pokemon adventure. But that explanation is stupid, so I just have to ask the developers, what the fuck? The game really begins when you reach Phoenix City and encounter 2 men dragging a large sack. Just an average Friday night in San Francisco, until you battle them and realize that there's a girl in the sack. I take it back. An average Friday night in Chicago. This girl's name is Rui, who has the uncanny ability to see shadow Pokemon, which is the reason that Team Cypher, the real evil team, captured her. The two speak to the mayor, who says that Team Cypher is a problem, yet he won't do anything to fix it. Now that's how you know he's a politician. Leaving the Colosseum, oh, that's where they got the name from. You run into 3 Snagem grunts, and this is more or less where the so-called starter select happens. You get to pick one of the 3 grunts to face, each who has a shadow Pokemon of one of the Johto starters. This battle is simply the game's way to teach you how shadow Pokemon work, because unlike normal Pokemon games, this is the only way to obtain new members to your team. There are no wild battles, and you actually get to steal or snag shadow Pokemon from other trainers. I always knew Team Rocket were the good guys. It works exactly the same as catching in every other game, other than the fact that you are literally stealing from other trainers. It's so weird for them to do this coming from a franchise that's so adamant that stealing is bad in the main games and the anime. But I love the change because I'm an evil little shit. And not only does shadow Pokemon completely change the way that you capture Pokemon, but it also completely changes the way that you raise and create your own team. Raising Pokemon is so much different than a normal Pokemon game because they don't actually gain experience while battling. Instead, shadow Pokemon have a purple gauge that slowly drains the more often you use them in battle. Once the gauge is empty, you can take them to a shrine to purify them. You may ask, why would I want to do that? Shadow Pokemon look so much cooler. And yes, I do agree with you, but in this case, it would be stupid to not purify them. At first, the only move they will know is Shadow Rush, which is essentially just tackle with recoil, so that's pretty shit. Shadow Pokemon will also just randomly disobey you, which is even more annoying, and they can sometimes enter what's known as Hyper Mode, where they pretty much never obey you and will just hurt themselves. Yet, actually, this is the best thing that your Shadow Pokemon can do. You're probably giving me a what the hell face right now, but hear me out. You want this to happen because it is the quickest way to purify your Pokemon. If you select the Call command in battle, it will calm them down out of Hyper Mode and will take a large chunk out of their gauge. It's sort of a love-hate relationship with Hyper Mode because as much as I love the quickness for purifying, it just wastes an entire turn, which is the worst in a difficult battle. But with all the negatives aside, I really do enjoy this method of catching and raising Pokemon, especially since when you finally do purify them, they gain back all of the experience that they would have gained without being shadowfied. The developers could have been massive dicks without that, but I'm happy they decided to just be chodes instead. The only downside to only being able to catch shadow Pokemon is that there is such a small amount of them available. Of course, every game has their limits, but Colosseum is extremely limited to just 48. But hey, at least they prepared us for the future of console Pokemon games. The majority of the game is tracking down Team Cypher across the Orre region to learn more about what they are doing with the shadow Pokemon. The Orre region is quite a bit different than all the other regions that came before it. Kanto, Johto, and Hoenn are all based on locations in Japan, but the Orre region was actually based on the deserts of Arizona, making this the first real region not based in Japan before Unova. But because it's based on a desert, there's literally nothing to do besides the cities, which is why the game doesn't let you really explore the region. You can only walk around the cities or important locations, which is a bit of a letdown, but if you've ever been to a desert, you'd know it's boring as shit, so they made the right choice. Following Team Cypher, you learn that they were working with Team Snagem to steal trainers' Pokemon in order to corrupt them into shadow Pokemon. Grunts, or peons as they're called for some reason, are stationed all across the region with shadow Pokemon that you can snag and then purify, but some of the Cypher admins have special shadow Pokemon. 3 of them have the legendary beast, which is actually the easiest way to obtain them in Gen 3 by transferring them to the main games. Then the most iconic admin, the red and white Afro Michael Jackson Mirror B, just has the pseudo Wudo. No idea why, especially when the rest of his team is just Ludicolo, but I guess they ran out of legendaries to hand out. As you continue to snag and defeat Team Cypher, you will eventually come face to face with the leader. The mayor? Wow, a politician turning out to be an evil villain. Makes perfect sense for a region based on a location in the United States. Escade reveals himself to be the leader of Team Cypher, Evice. Real question here, why the fuck do Pokemon games continuously give the evil team leaders confusing to pronounce names? Like Giovanni was fine, but now we have Getsis and Guzma and Lysander, who I still think should be pronounced Lysandre, but whatever. Advice's team is full of some of the most powerful Pokemon in the game, and he even has his own shadow Pokemon, Tyranitar. But just like any game, you get a Master Ball during your adventure, so just use it here to avoid the headache of having to catch it. Honest to God, I believe that Advice is the most difficult evil leader from any Pokemon game. I can't put my finger on why, but for some reason I always struggle with him compared to any mainline game. But that's not a bad thing. A final battle should be difficult, or else it wouldn't feel satisfying. Advice loses, of course, and tries to escape out of a helicopter, but out of nowhere, Ho-Oh swoops in and takes them out of the sky, leading to their arrest. This is easily the most random thing to happen in this game. Like, why Ho-Oh? And where has Ho-Oh been this entire game with all the crap Team Cypher has been doing? Well, if you want a real answer, this is the game's way of telling you that Ho-Oh is actually the last obtainable Pokemon in this game. You need to snag all 48 Shadow Pokemon in the main game, including the legendary beasts. Purify them, then enter the battle mountain using the 6 Pokemon you last saved with in the main game and defeat all 100 trainers. Then, and only then, will Ho-Oh appear on this random black background and then be deposited directly into your PC. Easily one of the most convoluted ways of obtaining any legendary Pokemon, especially since this is the only feasible way to obtain it in Generation 3. But at least you can do it without getting the damn bonus disc unlike Jirachi. Pokemon Colosseum is easily one of the most unique Pokemon adventures, especially for its time. It is such an underappreciated Pokemon game, and more people definitely should go check it out. Just make sure to get a copy with the bonus disc so you're not screwed over like all of Europe. Pokemon Colosseum was the first to do so many things for the franchise. The first real adventure on a main console that wasn't solely battling, the first game to really show the potential of double battles for future games, and it was the first to introduce an entirely new type of Pokemon that is still so much of a cult classic that it made a return in Pokemon Go of all things. No, it's not the longest game or the most in-depth game, nor does it have the largest Pokedex, but it is fantastic as a fun adventure unlike any other game. Well, unlike any other game besides one. Pokemon Colosseum was actually so well received that it got its own sequel just a few years later called Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. This game gets so much more love than Colosseum for everything that it added, which... we'll get to that another time.